Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being with us today. This is a regular voting meeting of the Prescott City Council. Today is Tuesday, November the 18th, 2014. Today we have the pleasure of having Rabbi Jessica Rosenthal that'll lead us in the prayer, and then Councilman Lozelle will lead us in the pledge. So thank you for being here.
God, you dwell on high, yet you seek to bring comfort to those who dwell on the earth. God, your voice rolls down like thunder, yet we sometimes seek you amidst the silent questions that afflict us in the middle of the night. God, you maintain high moral standards, yet you are also our strength and our guide when our frailties emerge. God, on this day of deliberation, we ask you to help these council members find you not only through their charismatic speeches and sound arguments, but also when facing any doubts, questions, and struggles that might arise. Help them to find the stories and words to move one another. Help them to hear and consider the words of their colleagues. Open their hearts to the possible and help them to remember the improbable. As you, our representatives, take on the extraordinary task of aiding our great city, may you also be cognizant of its individuals. For all who are present today, let us draw inspiration not only from your greatness, but also from your humility and kindness. Let us find this balance of sacred and profane, complex and simple, communal and individual, within ourselves, within these deliberations, within our community, and within one another. Then we might indeed merit the gifts you have bestowed upon us. And we say together, Amen.
Amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Kirkendall?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lemerson?
Here.
Councilman Arnold?
Here.
Councilman Blair?
Yes.
Councilman Kukmio?
Here.
Councilman Lozelle?
Here.
Councilwoman Wilcox?
Here.
Before we go to the consent agenda, we have one little housekeeping item on item C on the regular agenda that has to do with the ordinance amending the Model City Tax Code. This will include a public hearing today, and it was properly posted in the newspaper and on the city's website, but in the agenda it did not indicate a public hearing, so we will include a public hearing on item C today when we get to that point. Okay, on the consent agenda, we're going to pull item D for the moment and discuss it later, and then we'll vote on it as a separate item. So that said, is there any questions on the consent agenda? Seeing no questions, do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items 1A through 1F, excluding 1D.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Let's vote, please. Okay, let's go to item D.
Mayor,
Okay.
I ask that that be pulled from the consent agenda. It looked like an awful expensive repair to me, and I wanted to explain why, and I didn't have time to talk to staff ahead of time to get that information, and I want to give them proper opportunity to explain not only to me, but to the public, so the public understands why we would be asking for this kind of money on a repair.
And Mayor, I'm going to declare a potential conflict of interest on this and step out for a sec.
Mayor and Council, good afternoon. The Solid Waste Division uses suspension scales at the transfer station to weigh inbound and outbound loads. And the scales capture the weight, and from the weight, the appropriate disposal fees are calculated. On August 26th of 2014, the inbound scale failed when 3 of the 12 suspension bridges collapsed. One of the solid waste collection vehicles was on the scale at the time, and the scale actually dropped about 4 inches with the truck on it. And due to the extent of the failure, the division had to close the inbound scale at the transfer station and establish a temporary traffic control pattern that crossed the outbound scale. So we were forced to have inbound and outbound traffic coming on the same scale once the scale failed. And we do about 237 transactions a day. So that really puts a lot of traffic on the one scale, and it makes for a potentially dangerous operation. The division contacted Southwestern Scale. That's the company that we use to do our quarterly maintenance and calibration on the scale. And they came up to do the emergency repair services. Fortunately, this company is very responsive when we do have problems with our scale, and they do come up that day usually and try to get our scale back up and working. But upon inspection by Southwest Scale, it was determined the scale needed to be lifted back up and a new suspension kit needed to be installed in one section of the scale. And the repair took 69 hours, 69 labor hours, and it needed a new custom part for the suspension system, and the total cost for everything to repair the scale was the $12,530 roughly. And the work was completed on August 29th, so the scale was down about 3 days total. And the city's procurement code does allow for authorization of emergency purchases if a situation is determined to be necessary for the public interest, subject to subsequent ratification by the council. And the Mayor Pro Tem had asked how much would it cost to put in a new scale. We have a estimate that to replace the inbound and outbound scales at the transfer station is going to cost approximately $120,000. And we plan on budgeting for that, hopefully in fiscal year 17.
Thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome, Mayor Pro Tem.
Any questions from any other on the council? Okay. Public have a comment on that? Okay. Do we
Mayor?
have a motion now to approve this?
I move to approve payment in the amount of $12,529.49 for emergency scale repairs performed by Southwestern Scale Company, Incorporated.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please. Okay.
Passes 6-0.
That out of the way, we'll move
Thank
to the
you.
regular agenda. Item A, when you're ready, Kim.
Adoption of resolution number 4263-1472, approving amendment number 1 to an intergovernmental agreement with the Yavapai County Community College District for joint use of facilities, and approval of a $25,000 contribution toward an additional tennis court at Yavapai College, city contract number 2011-447, Parks and Recreation Development Impact Fee Fund.
Joe, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The city and Yavapai College entered into an intergovernmental agreement on May 24th of 2011 for shared use of public facilities. Amendment number 1 to that IGA acknowledges the renovation of the existing tennis courts, construction of one additional court, public availability of the courts, and related maintenance obligations of the college. This item additionally includes approval of a $25,000 city contribution toward the construction of the additional court. The existing IGA provides for the shared use of a number of facilities: Rough Rider Park, Kinley Field, Walraven Gym, Bill Valley Field, Yavapai Performance Hall, and Grace Sparks Activity Center, and the associated obligations of the city and the college. With the recent renovation and expansion of the college tennis courts, the addition of these facilities to the IGA will recognize and delineate the availability for public use. The amendment provides that the college will maintain the courts, parking areas, landscape, and pay for utilities. Prescott will continue to be responsible for maintenance of the city property that abuts and is adjacent to the college property near the tennis courts. The college will schedule use for the tennis courts, with college programs receiving priority. However, they will be available for daily use by the general public, for which the college may charge nominal use fees consistent with other college facilities. The fees presently established by the college for the tennis courts are $250 for an annual pass, $25 for a monthly pass, $5 for singles, and that's for 90 minutes, and $10 for doubles, which is 2 hours. During the fiscal year 2015 budget process, the City Council discussed a contribution towards the expansion of the tennis court facility, which now consists of 7 courts, 6 that were renovated and 1 additional court, and this agenda item enables payment of that contribution. funding of $25,000 is available in the Development Impact Fee Fund for Parks and Recreation in the fiscal year 15 budget. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Greg?
Joe, this, if I remember correctly, this $25,000 comes out of the, what am I trying to think? Your
Bed
open
tax.
space. I'm sorry.
No, it comes out of the impact fees.
The impact
that
fee,
for new
correct?
growth.
The one that is no longer being replenished, correct?
Correct. One that's no longer being replenished, it's the Parks Impact Fee.
Right. And I'm going to ask the same question that I asked during this discussion before. If this was the last $25,000 in that bucket, would you spend it on this?
Councilman Lozelle, if it was the last $25,000, I would have to look very hard at it. There's plenty of needs.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
Thank you. My question is, should it be coming out of bed tax? If the logic of the city is that our participation with the college, in which I have no complaint with, please don't misinterpret my comments, is built on the aspect of tourism promotion with tournaments, etc., to fill the bedrooms in the hotels and the restaurants and the bars, what have you, all the folks that come here with these tournaments that also generate revenue within the city coffers. Shouldn't we be funding that in a mechanism that we have set up for tourism promotion and parks and recreation development, and that's our bed tax dollars?
Well, Councilman Lamerson, it's twofold. I mean, there is public daily use that's, you know, a pretty active place. But in addition to that, you're also correct. There will be tournaments that will, you know, enhance our out-of-town visitation throughout the year. And with the expanded facility, those events should grow larger. So both are applicable.
Very, very similar to Councilman Lozelle, I do have a concern that we have a finite resource right now with the Parks and Rec impact fee, because we don't have it anymore, and there's a finite amount of money there. However, we do continually collect bed tax on an annual basis, every day, every week, every year. And it would seem to me a more appropriate item to be paid for out of bed tax with the idea that it's coming. Our participation is, and I understand it's twofold, and all Parks and Rec is twofold. But don't forget, Parks and Rec includes tennis courts also. I mean, I'm not here to define what parks are or recreation is, but if we're participating with a college in a park-like manner, which, you know, a tennis court could be considered, or recreation, that a tennis court could be considered, and tourism promotion, that fills the exact mission statement of what the voters voted on for parks and recreation development and tourism promotion. So that's my only point, is I don't have a problem sharing with the college with the $25,000. My question comes, wouldn't it be a more prudent expenditure from bed tax dollars rather than from a finite that we might need to expend someplace else, and then we don't have the money once it's gone?
Jane?
Thanks. I'm still having trouble with the fact that the city is contributing $25,000 and then the college charges a fee for the general public to use the facility. It seems to me our taxpayers have already contributed toward the facility and they shouldn't be charged. So I'm wondering, has the city contributed toward other recreational facilities at the college for which they're now charging the general public a fee?
Councilwoman Wilcox, not that I'm aware of. The fee is set with the intent that it would cover ongoing maintenance costs. One of the reasons that the courts got into disrepair and required this renovation was due to the fact that they hadn't set aside any money to maintain those courts, and so that's why they got into the disarray that they were. So I think the intent from the college, and I apologize, the college with the national soccer tournament going on today, as well as they have a governing board meeting, doesn't have anybody in attendance, but I think the intent is purely to recover maintenance costs through that fee.
And follow-up question, are any other governmental entities contributing? Because surely people from Prescott Valley and outside the city are using these tennis courts.
I'm not aware how the money was collected through the college foundation. I don't know whether or not there's other entities, but I can certainly check into that.
Okay.
Chris?
You know, I think everyone in the area is contributing to it because it's Yavapai College, so whatever taxes are paid through that going towards this project is being paid by the whole community. And the fact is that with this, Prescott taxpayers are contributing a second time to throw in on this project. But how old are our tennis courts that we have at the Armory? I mean, they have to be from about, what, 1930, 1940?
Well, the original ones were, and I don't know if they're in the exact same location, but when the park was originally developed, there was tennis courts. They were renovated again and put the Omnicourt surface on those in, I'm going to say, the late 90s, 97, somewhere in there.
So it's been quite a bit of time, and you know, people used to use the tennis courts over there at the high school, but I understand now that sometimes those gates are locked and there's no access to go use those facilities now?
That's correct. I believe that it's a closed campus, so during school hours, if there's nobody to monitor the use of those, they're closed, but that's as much as I know.
And the other tennis courts are really in private hands at the racket club where you have to have a membership to join or whatnot. There's really not a whole lot of public access for this. What's the total project cost for all 7 of these courts to go in? Do you know? It was like 1.2 or something, wasn't it?
1.3 million is what I remember.
So we're contributing $25,000 and guaranteeing access to our citizens to these facilities for $25,000. You know, out of that whole budget, 1.3, and we're throwing in 25. There is the tourism aspect to it because if you've seen the plans for it, it's a nice court with bleachers on both sides. We can have tournaments that will generate tourism, but really, I think the underlying thing is we are guaranteeing public access to a state-of-the-art tennis facility for our citizens to use. And they may have to pay a little fee, but that seems to be the ongoing thing in Parks and Rec is we need to find money for operations and maintenance. I'm behind being part of this project. I think it's a good thing. The only question I had, Joe, was I know we just spent $83,000, I think it was, to redo the parking area there. And in the agreement here, it says that the college will maintain the courts, parking areas, and landscaping. I think the parking areas are going to stay on us. Or are they assuming the maintenance of those parking areas? Because I don't think there's any other parking areas there, correct?
Councilman Kuknio, there is some parking that's on the college property, probably about 16 parking spots, and that's what we're referring to. We'll continue to maintain the parking lot on our property, which is the majority of the parking for the park in general. But they do also have some on their property.
And really, I think with that parking, that was a good investment as well, because if anybody's been down there in the summer, that thing is full to overflowing because of the baseball that goes on down there. So I'm glad to see the improvements you made down there. I'm glad to see Yavapai College get this new facility for the tennis players of our community, and I look forward to seeing the tourism impacts that tournaments will have in the area. Thank you.
Steve?
For all the reasons I agree, except I would suggest that one of the main things that I've always pushed is users' fees. We never tend to want to think that we have to pay for anything once it's built, but it's just like the water leak, Rosser and Willow Creek Road. These impact fees we're going to talk about today, assuming things happen and we have no money to fix those things. So to pay $2.50 for 2 hours, a mere $1.25 to get exercise and entertainment at that facility is absolutely nothing as far as I'm concerned. Second of all, I agree with Mr. Lamerson as well as Mr. Lazell that this thing should be split in half for funding. $12.50 coming out of impact fee because there is impact. We have increased the players, and $12.50 coming from bed tax because it has generated a facility for tourism. So it would be my position is that we agree with funding the $25,000 but split in half from tourism and half from park development fees.
Charlie?
Mayor, thank you. And you know, I've been a big proponent of this partnership for a while now, thinking that you have 1,100 people was the last count I had that donated money towards this. The Tennis Association raised over $150,000 on their own. The city has how many courts under our control?
We have the courts at the Armory, which are 8 courts.
And this is a major recreation use. If you look across the city and you look at the study that was done several years ago that said we really don't need more tennis courts, but it commented to the fact that majority of the tennis courts that are here are not under the city's control or are guaranteed open to the public. At any given time, they can be closed to the public, made not available. Yavapai College came to us originally asking for a lot more money than this. I think $25,000 is a good partnership to ensure the availability of a state-of-the-art facility to our residents. You know, we've been talking about the courts for going on 9 months. You know, I appreciate the comments about splitting it with the bed tax, but we approved the bed tax allocation 2 months ago and said this is how we're going to spend that money. And I don't really want to go back and revisit that. I think this is expansion. This is a new opportunity for us in tourism and in our sports. You know, we know the tournaments bring money to the community. Here's something that's good.
We have contingency in bed tax.
And, you know, beyond that, I think that, you know, I'm ready to move forward in approving the agreement as it sits. We addressed the concerns about the IGA and the user fees. I can appreciate the concern, but at the end of the day, the reason, as you alluded to, Joe, that the courts fell apart is because there was no money to maintain them. This is a big investment, and let us not forget that also here on Willow, they came in and corrected the drainage issue and the crossing there. So they also made a big improvement to their secondary access point for the college and something that a lot of people in the community use. So I'm ready to move forward as it's proposed and approve it.
And Mayor, Council, if I could, I want to correct a statement. We don't have 8 tennis courts, we have 4. I was thinking pickleball. We have 4 courts at the Armory.
Yeah. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciated Councilman Blair's comments. I appreciated Councilman Kuknio's comments, and I appreciate yours, Charlie. But I still go back to, we had very specific ballot language on different things, and we have a finite resource in our impact parks and recreation that will never come back again. And I think it would be most prudent to reserve that in case we need it. I mean, there will be some items coming up that we absolutely will perceive differently as a need rather than a want. I do support the $25,000 expenditure with partnering with the college. I still think that we have a different revenue stream that we could approach, and from that standpoint, that's where I'm at.
Gene?
Well, I support the contribution of $25,000 also, but the agreement doesn't say anything about what the fees charged to Prescott residents or the general public will be. It simply says that the college may require the assessment of nominal use fees to use the courts. And right now we know what the fees are, but tomorrow, next year, they could change, and then they don't really become public because they could be out of the price range of the general public, member of the general public. So on that, for that reason, I'm going to vote against this.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I'm going to keep beating this up. I'm against this because we have, for several reasons. One, we have a limited amount to pay for this court out of a bucket of money that we're running out of. B, we cannot, we've already put a parking lot in for Yavapai College. We put in the access for them. They build these courts with the assumption that we're going to give them $25,000 when they have their ability to raise our property taxes at any given moment through their board vote. They don't take to the public. So we had another rate increase not too long ago, and they built these courts and didn't take this into account. So I'm going to vote against it.
Steve?
Mr. McConnell, do we have the ability to be able to draw 12.5 out of the bed tax fund, knowing that there's a contingency in there?
The financial resources are there.
Thank
Councilman.
you. I still go back and say that if you look at it and put it on paper, those courts are used for 2 specific reasons: recreation impact and for the benefit of tourism. And that should be split. And if it's split, I will support it.
Charlie?
Mayor, along those lines, you know, again, I go back to the fact that we approved a budget, we approved the bed tax allocation, but I'm not opposed to looking at it, but I don't think then that today's the day to vote on it. And Councilwoman Wilcox did bring up a good question in the IGA, and so I would propose that we table this item to a future agenda and get those questions answered. Because I don't want to see this fail over some minor technicality on something that I feel is important. We've budgeted it, we've discussed it at length, we've had plenty of opportunity to address some of these issues for months. But I do agree on the question related to access, that could be worth spending a few minutes talking about and bringing it back.
Before we do a motion to table, under the background, it says the college will schedule use of the tennis courts with college programs receiving priority. However, they will be available for daily use by the general public. That could be city, county, for which the, their college programs receive priority, and then they're available for daily use by the general public. I don't think you're going to see much tourism use of those courts. Number one, the college will be running the program, and I don't know what we're doing with them in the way of tourism, cooperative development. But it seemed to me like this will be a college program, and the college will determine who uses them, when they use them, and what the price is going to be. So that said, Charlie, you want to make a motion to table this?
Mayor, move to table agenda item A.
Second.
Okay. And any time frame you want to stick something with it that we'll have another meeting?
I'd prefer to come back sooner rather than later. And I'd like to have somebody from the college here, as well as somebody from the Prescott Area Tennis Association, to talk about their understanding of how the tournaments are going to be scheduled and the tourism impact. So I'd like to see it, table it till the first meeting in January.
So that'll be January 2nd.
Who's going to determine what is missing out of this IGA that we want to see come back? It's very apparent that Gene has a question. I have a question in funding. We have our own questions, so who's going to make sure that's ironed out? Joe, are you going to take the lead on that? Have you heard enough from us to get what we need?
I've gotten your concerns today, so I'll take those into consideration and address those.
Thank you.
Jim, you still have a comment?
Yeah, I did, Mayor. I supported Charlie's deal there. That's Gene beat me to the second. But I would argue the point that when the college runs tournaments, whether they're softball, whether they're baseball, whether they're swimming, whether they're soccer, whatever the case would be, when a college does things like that, and they do it here in the city of Prescott, you do get tourists. You do get them in the bars, you get them in the restaurants, you get them in the hotels. So I do think there is a tourism element to this, and that's I don't have a problem participating at the $25,000 level. I do think that knowing that we have financial challenges in the general fund, knowing that there are certain things that we have that are targeted taxes. Bed tax is a targeted tax. We tax the very people that come here and use the hotels and the things for things like this. I would like to see some of that used for this type of thing, and that's my only comment on that. So, but I do think we need to participate with the college.
And you noted that, Joe.
Correct.
Chris?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to add that, these kind of cooperations aren't unheard of. I mean, right now, when we talk about the tourism impact, there's 12 of the finest soccer teams from around the country in Prescott right now for the college Tournament of Champions, the national championship right here. Our hotels are getting loaded up. There's like 2 teams at every hotel. How much money is that bringing to us? We partner with Yavapai College all the time. And if somebody came here and did a presentation and said, you know what, I'm going to build you a $1.3 million facility for recreation and guarantee access to the citizens of Prescott for $25,000, would we bite on that hook, or would we pass it by? And that's what we're doing right now.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. Let's vote, please.
Chris, you're off. I'm sorry, Jim.
Okay, looks like 5-2.
Okay, motion passes 5-2.
Okay, when you're ready, let's go to item B.
Item B is the adoption of resolution number 4262-1471, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Arizona through the Arizona State Forester for the fiscal year 2015 Cooperative Wildland Fire Training Project, city contract number 2015-070.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Dennis Light, Fire Chief, City of Prescott Fire Department. This afternoon, I'm here to seek your authorization to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the state forestry in order to provide some sustained funding for an existing city position dedicated to wildfire and the Wildfire Academy. Pardon me. State of Arizona fiscal year 2015 includes funding for a full-time cooperative training position to support the Arizona Wildfire Council, and with that manage the Arizona Wildfire and Incident Management Academies. As you're probably accustomed to, for the last 12 years, I believe, they've had an academy. For the last 7 or 8 years, it's been here in the Prescott area, where we have over 700 firefighters from across this state and interstate regions coming to this area for some of the best training in the nation. It is a nationally recognized wildfire academy that is actually very focused for our needs within the state of Arizona. We feel that the arrangement will benefit the city, the state, and overall the Wildfire Academy effectiveness. The terms of the IGA allows us some latitude to determine the work plan associated with Tony Shaka's position in mutual cooperation with the state forester. Ultimately, the agreement will result in the improved wildfire response throughout our community, along with increased access to wildfire training for those requiring it. As we look forward to the opportunity to collectively work and collaboratively work with the state, we feel that the IGA with the state will replace a very inefficient mode of pass-through on monies from a reimbursement to a quarterly billing cycle, and in order for us to recover some of those costs. The state has allocated personnel costs in the amount of $52,000 directed towards Tony Shaka's position primarily, along with $14,000 for travel, fuel, and other expenses. In return, we provide the office space, the mode of transport, and some degree of facility access for Tony, along with other members of the Wildfire Academy. With that, Scott Hunt, the state forester, is here with us today, along with members of the Arizona Wildfire Academy. And between the three of us, we should be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Steve?
I don't have a question. I just have a statement that I appreciate the fact that those folks are here getting knowledge of the very best, and that the city of Prescott is indeed blessed that we have 2 Type 1 incident commanders at our fingertips, one of them employed by the city, or 2 of them employed by the city of Prescott. So thank you for what you do, and if you want to talk about economics, bringing 700 hungry, drinking force firefighters
in
to
moderation.
our bars, restaurants, and hotels, it's a great impact at a great time of year where the city of Prescott needs it. So thank you.
Very good.
Charlie?
Mayor, thank you. And just echoing Steve's comments, I think it's a great opportunity for Prescott. I appreciate Emory Riddle's support of this program and the state. So this one's an easy yes for me.
Okay. Our guests are here. Anyone who would like to comment on this?
Scott?
Thank you for considering. Okay. Anyone else in the public? Seeing none, gentlemen, we'll accept the motion.
Mayor, move to adopt resolution number 4262-1471.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Passed unanimously.
Okay, item C, and this is the one that we mentioned earlier, that a part of this is also a public hearing. So, Mark, go ahead.
Thank you.
Want me to read the ordinance?
Go ahead.
Okay. Ordinance number, well, I'll read adoption of ordinance number 4914-1452, approving the 2014 amendments to the Model City Tax Code. Ordinance number 4914-1452, an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, amending the Model City Tax Code adopted by the City of Prescott pursuant to the Prescott City Code Chapter 4-1-1, including any and all future amendments to the Model City Tax Code. by deleting Article 3 of the Model City Tax Code in its entirety and replacing it with new Article 3, Licensing and Record Keeping, containing new sections 4-1-300, 4-1-310, 4-1-320, 4-1-330, 4-1-340, 4-1-350, 4-1-360, 4-1-362, 4-1-364, 4-1-366, 4-1-370, 4-1-372, and 4-1-380, and deleting existing regulations 300.1, 300.2, 310.1, 310.2, 310.3, 350.1, 350.2, 350.3, 360.1, and 360.2, and declaring a delayed effective date of January 1st, 2015.
Thank you, Kim. As Kim mentioned, this is an amendment to the Model City Tax Code. It was reviewed and passed by the Municipal Tax Code Commission, which our Mayor Kirkendall actually sits on, back on October 10th. We actually discussed it at the October 7th meeting when Mayor Kirkendall was preparing to go down to it. The amendments to the code deal mainly with they do deal exclusively with the licensing section of our code, which is Section 300, as you heard as Clerk on Webb read it. This is to bring the Model City Tax Code, and thereby our version of the Model City Tax Code, in compliance with House Bill 2111 and follow-up House Bill 2389. Both have to do with the movement of state collection to our sales tax collection to the state. So this is making those changes to our tax code, basically replacing the licensing section with a much scaled-down version that will bring us into compliance. As the Mayor mentioned earlier, this part is also a public hearing. Anytime we do a tax code amendment, we have to have a public hearing. The public hearing was published in the paper on November 3rd and on our website since November 3rd to notify the public that there would be this change. So with that, I'd open it up to questions from council and also comments from the public at the public hearing.
Why don't we go to the public first? Any questions or comments? Paul Mark is at the podium. Okay. Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon. I'm just, okay, so this is all forced on us by the state, in essence, by their new regulation saying they want to collect the taxes instead of letting us do it and collect the information and all that fun stuff, right?
It's a change to the licensing section of our tax code in relation to this overall bigger House bills that I referenced.
Right. And what happens if we say no?
Well, don't run off.
Well, you know, they're making us make these changes. Is it beneficial for the city, or is it just they're throwing us under the bus?
Mayor, if we say no, we have to designate one member of the public who has spoken publicly at a public hearing to serve the sentence.
So we've got that behind us. Okay. Dan, I'll speak to part of that. Your word forced might be a little offensive to some people, but the legislature did change some of the licensing requirements and the collection methods. And in order to adhere to that legislation, well, we don't have a choice.
Right.
But
okay.
to make these changes, yeah.
That's kind of what I thought. I just wanted to make sure we were clear that anybody who wants to blame any of this on anybody should talk to the state.
Well, my question to Mark, and I think it's already been answered, but even though we have been postponed for 1 year to work with the state on this, does that have any effect on this?
It doesn't really. The postponement of the actual collection of the tax to the state for 1 year was one portion of House Bill 2111. The other portions, the contracting tax, the requirement for license renewal, the license renewal, are all going into effect January 1. Because of the delay, because DOR isn't ready to take on these things, city staff will have to do the January 1 renewal of license, which again is unusual for the city because our license is non-renewable. This year we're going to have to renew it, so we will be contacting all of our taxpayers with their December return, their annual return in January, with new forms that they need to fill out.
And again, that's privileged taxpayers and use.
Yes, privileged and use taxpayers, not all businesses like doctors or lawyers or
Right.
just.
Jane?
Well, thank you. That was a great segue to my question. Could you give us some examples of what businesses fall under this code and what kind of businesses don't?
Retail establishments, anybody who collects a privilege tax, jewelry stores, retail establishments, rentals, residential rentals, grocery stores, all those fall under it. Strictly service organization are businesses like realtors or accountants or lawyers would not, or do not at this point.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Getting back to Daniel's question, now I'm not him, I'm me. What happens if we do say no? I mean, what's this cause and effect consequence of a no vote on this?
I would leave that to the attorney. I mean, we would be out of compliance with state law. Obviously, sales tax is a critical revenue source for the city of Prescott. I would hate to take any steps that would affect our ability to actually legally collect sales tax.
And I think that needs to be heard loud and clear out in the public. We're on public television. And the fact of the matter is you've got 7 people sitting here who swore to uphold the state law. It's just that simple.
Chris?
Yeah, but that still doesn't make the boo-boo feel any better. I know, there's no financial impact anticipated with this portion of it, but to Daniel's statement, I think I heard that the net effect of these changes is going to be a negative 300 Gs to the city, right?
Yeah.
That's an estimate that we've come up with the changes in contracting.
Yeah, thank you.
Public, you've heard what we've talked about. Now, is there any comments? Okay. Do we have a motion?
All right, I'll do it.
I think they wanted to die of a lack of motion.
Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 4914-1452.
Second.
Is that adequate to comply, John? And we don't need to close the public hearing? No. Okay. Okay, second? Okay, the motion made and seconded. Let's vote, please.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Item D.
Item D is the award of contracts for title and escrow services for various real property transactions to 1, Yavapai Title Agency Incorporated, City Contract Number 2015-064, and 2, Lawyers Title of Arizona Incorporated, City Contract Number 2015-065, each in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon.
In October, the city put out an RFP for title and escrow services on advertising. We did this also about a year ago. We had a 1-year contract, which has expired, and we're put out again. It saved the city about 50% on what the city was originally paying for title and escrow services. Yavapai Title and Lawyers Title both came back with really good proposals for our fees again this year. On both of them, we're looking at doing, instead of just a 1-year contract total and having to come back to council again, we're proposing to do a 1-year with 5 1-year extensions upon mutual agreement between the city and the title companies. The amount on this would be no greater than $50,000 for the contract for each of the 2 contracts. And if you have any questions at this point.
My question, were the RFPs, were the proposals identical?
Excuse me?
Were the 2 proposals identical?
Yes, they were. The RFP we put out, advertised, was out for everybody to bid on, and they were the 2 that came back with the highest and best for us as far as best quality and also the lowest pricing.
Okay. And so will you every other one to make it equal, or do you anticipate if we don't buy much property, well, obviously we'll spend less money?
Absolutely. That's why we put a cap on there so that we would not go above that without council approval.
Okay, would you, I guess what I'm trying to find out, are you going to, since they were both equal, are you going to split the business as it goes on, or use up 50,000 with one and see if there's anything
That's how we did
left?
for the last year. Actually, we used, towards the Yavapai Title, they had the lowest pricing, so we used them first. And then we had Lawyers Title, they actually were also the same one last year in the second position. That way we're having the best pricing to start with, but it gives us a backup just in case something happens to the one that has the best pricing. If they get too busy or they go out of business or something happens where we can't use a Yavapai Title, we have someone to fall back on immediately to continue on with our processes.
Okay, this has been I know I've had inquiries ever since I've been here on why one title company has all the business. And I guess my question is still, is Yavapai Title going to get all the business until the 50,000 is used, and then we go to the other one, even though they were identical bids?
Actually, well, there is a slight difference. Lawyers Title is slightly more expensive than Yavapai Title. The services they provide are the same, but the pricing is slightly lower on Yavapai Titles. So be it to the city's advantage to use them first to keep our costs down.
Okay. Then if one is cheaper than the other, why are we having two? Why didn't we just use the lowest bid and make this 100,000 if that's what we anticipate?
Actually, we're looking at past history and moving forward within that time period. I believe that 50,000 is probably sufficient for that entire time period. But if something happened to Yavapai Title and they were no longer able to provide the services, this will give us an opportunity to immediately go into and use a lawyer's title to complete all the transactions we have.
Okay.
So we're not stopped.
I guess you spurred a question for me, Mary. You made a comment about the parcels that the city of Prescott may want to buy. Will that include parcels that the city of Prescott may want to sell
Councilman,
as well?
Yes, it would.
Do we have the ability to be able to, Mr. Manager, get a list of all properties owned by the city of Prescott? Is that list available?
We can provide that list, Councilman.
I would like to see that list. I know that we have things coming up in the future at the airport. We may want to liquidate some property to be able to move some funds around to provide capital improvements at the airport when we have property just sitting that doesn't belong in the city of Prescott, maybe in Chino, maybe. So I'd like to have that list.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Number one, you don't look like Henry Hash. And number two, you don't look like Kevin Connell. Who are you?
Don Hirsch.
Hi,
I'm the
Don.
real property specialist for the city.
All right, thank you very much. The way this was presented, it kind of looks like we're contracting for $100,000, but indeed we're not. It's for $50,000 with an opportunity to shift the indebtedness if something falls through on the first bidder. Am I correct?
Correct.
Thank you. So this is only a $50,000 expenditure, not $100,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Mayor, thanks, and having a lot of experience with title companies, they're both very adequate at what they do. In all honesty, I didn't look at these larger transaction numbers, but do either one of them provide a financial benefit when you get into a larger parcel sale, or is it still pretty much Yavapai's over lawyers?
It was Yavapai over lawyers throughout the entire process range, Councilman.
Perfect. And then just a off-the-cuff comment, Yavapai Title's offices are actually in the city. Lawyers is not. And so my preference would be to support our local, but they both are good companies. And I have faith that you'll use who you need on whatever transaction it is. So I've got no problem approving it.
Anyone else? Comments from the public? Have a motion?
Mayor, I'm going to do this in two, so I'm going to move to award contract number 2015-064 to Yavapai Title Agency Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
Second.
You want two motions for this, John?
You can do it either way, Mayor.
Okay, you want to, so we keep it in one motion, go ahead and add the
Excuse me.
other half?
Yeah, pardon me, Mayor. The clerk and I talked about this, and for clarity in her records, as the city attorney certainly is correct, it can be done in one motion, but the clerk would prefer separate motions so that there is individual tracking of this, each contract which has a separate number.
So you want two separate motions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did we have a second on the
Yes,
first
we
motion?
did.
Okay. That motion is made and seconded. Let's vote, please.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now,
Mayor, on the second contract, in case something goes south on the first one, I move to award contract number 2015065 to Lawyers Title of Arizona Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
Second.
motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item E, when you're ready. Okay.
Item E is the award of contract number 2015074 for the FY 2015 sidewalks repair project to Tricom Corporation in the amount of $195,526.65 from the Streets Fund.
Good afternoon, Henry.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Henry Hash, Public Works. This is really just a routine bidding process for our sidewalk projects. Public Works Department previously conducted a condition assessment of our sidewalks in downtown area. We went out to bid and followed all the procedures. We had 4 bids, and Tricom Corporation is the low bid. We had a base bid and 2 alternates. Fortunately, in this case, Tricom is the low bid for base bid as well as the 2 alternates, so it would make it a bit easier. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Steve.
In this bid and the replacement of some of these facilities that are fallen by the wayside because of lack of maintenance or because they're just old, does that include making them all ADA accessible?
To the best we can, yes. The answer is yes.
Okay. And while you're there, I want to thank you and your crew, Public Works, Street Department. You don't get thanked very often, but to stop the water leak at Gurley or at Rosser and Willow Creek Road that's been leaking for 2 years, and to have those folks out there in that hole in the mud, and they finally found the leak and it's fixed and the road's back open again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Henry, I just got a question on something here other than just the actual work on the sidewalks. I noticed the engineer's estimate base bid is close to $190,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
The sidewalks, are we putting new sidewalks in or replacing existing sidewalks?
This project, for the most part, is new sidewalks.
Oh, it's brand new sidewalks?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Replacing the old sidewalk.
Demolish, remove, and reinstall.
Because, I don't know, as just a person that has put in sidewalks, the engineering cost to go back up to that curb, and it's just kind of a no-brainer why we've got to have an engineer tell us what that, it's got to look like what we just tore apart. But if it's new.
Yeah. Well, if your question really relates to who is the engineer, we just call it that. It's Public Works in-house design.
Okay.
It's not a contract, a separate contract for engineering.
I thought we were like one of our local engineers. Okay. Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, echoing one of my fellow council, thank you for your work on this sort of thing. But actually, I want to thank the city manager for listening to us for the last several years, elevate this in the budgeting process so that it doesn't get swept under the carpet as it had been for years, and allow the sidewalks. You know, there's a lot more people that walk, use wheelchairs, various different things in the city than just drive cars. So I think the sidewalk infrastructure in the city of Prescott, which transports not only people in wheelchairs and people with canes, but it transports a lot of children. So I think it's very important to keep our eyes on our sidewalks. So thank you very much, Mr. McConnell.
Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor. Is the contractor here, Henry, today?
I don't.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
And just out of curiosity, is this going to fall under the KB1 license or the A license? Right. Which license are you using?
General engineering.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris?
Henry, who has a contract right now that's doing the work? Do you know? Sorry, I'm
Actually,
saying
no,
about
it's
that.
quite, really no one. We went out to bid earlier this year, and for some technical reasons, we rejected all bids.
Well, there, Councilman, you're referring to the prior contract, the first increment?
Yes, who's
where
been-
we actually did construct the improvements that were the subject of the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that was Kuwait General
Okay.
prior to this.
You know, they've been doing a really good job, and I think right now these efforts that are pretty recent, and thank you, Mr. McConnell, for hearing us. I agree with Councilman Lamerson. You can really start seeing a difference down there, and this is infrastructure. This is what we do as a council, and this isn't just sidewalks. I mean, this is transportation. This is part of transportation, mobility management, handicap access. I mean, we're catching a lot of that. So I'm glad to see this moving forward, and I look forward to seeing it keep getting improved. We don't have to have a giant project, but little by little, we're making things better. And much like our infrastructure underground on water and sewer, I think we're paying for past sins, and we're playing a lot of catch up, but it's looking good at what we're catching up on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a very popular program, and we have received many compliments.
Henry, do you anticipate bringing to the council future sidewalk replacement programs?
Yes.
Okay. Looking forward to that, because I agree with all the comments here that sidewalks are a very important part of our transportation system.
Mark, I have a question. Does this fall under the general contracting, talking about sales tax, the 3565?
Yes, as it is now. I'd have to look at the new law. I'm not sure how
Okay,
it will be with the
but
new-
we've got an out-of-town contractor, but we're doing the work in Prescott.
Yes, contracting is a location of the
So
job.
we're in that. Okay. Anyone else? Comments from the public?
Hi, my name is Sandra Smith. I'm at 701 Whites Bar. I'd just like to say thank you. I've been using mobility devices around the city for quite a while, and I can tell there is a difference where the work is done, a huge difference.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Do you have a motion?
Mayor, move to award the base bid additive alternatives number 1 and number 2 for fiscal year 2015 sidewalk repair project to Tricom Corporation in the amount of $195,526.65, city contract number 2015-074.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Vote, please.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item G.
Item F.
Or Item F, yeah.
Okay. Award of city contract number 2015-068 to Controls West Incorporated for SCADA SciTech services and licensing in an amount not to exceed $45,543.55 water and wastewater funds.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Joel.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This item is to award a bid contract to Controls West for specialized supervisory control and data acquisition program development, or as we refer it to, SCADA. Controls West is the only authorized SCADA service provider, distributor in the region. As the council memo points out, the city's water and wastewater system is comprised of over 150 remote facilities, and the city's utility division presently monitors these facilities using a technology called Spatia. Spatia is a proprietary 33-year-old system that's obsolete and increasingly unreliable. We have no way to maintain the system when it goes down. We have no way to buy new hardware when the hardware fails. Multiple city departments have been involved in a master plan for SCADA in order to replace the Spatia system with a scalable SCADA system that's non-proprietary and expandable to address all of our needs. Numerous benefits are listed in the council memo, but ultimately SCADA provides operations personnel the tools necessary to do the job efficiently and meet customer expectations. The city selected SciTech after researching the costs, software support, and functionality of all other softwares and platforms available. Subsequent to this decision, various water and wastewater facilities have been equipped with SciTech through capital improvement projects. Continued implementation of this software and of this technology will standardize the system that we are using. As I mentioned earlier, Controls West is the region's only SciTech software distributor, and they were selected for completion due to their experience with the SciTech platform. As with any system, you need a solid foundation to ensure that it's robust and can support future enhancements. This contract that is being brought to you today and recommended for award provides the means to consolidate our licensing and a foundation to build a well-thought-out SCADA system. In the future, Public Works will be coming back to council to request authorization for future contracts to fully implement this SCADA system. I brought a few pictures along with me to help explain what SCADA is, and Mark, if you can help me out there. The best way I can explain SCADA is that it is a control panel, or, excuse me, an instrument panel. Much like your car has an instrument panel, has a speedometer, odometer, check engine light, etc. SCADA for a utility system has an hour meter, alarm, security camera, etc. So a couple of pictures. You know, this is what our instrument panel looks like. This is one well site in particular. It has a tank. You can see the tanks. You can see the pumps. We can, at a glance, get operational information. Are the pumps running? Are they not running? Have they been running for multiple days and shouldn't have been running? It gives us that instantaneous feedback. Just another picture that shows, you know, valves, pumps, wells, etc. But it doesn't just look at the mechanical equipment. It also looks at doors. We can tell if a door's been open or closed. That's very important for vandalism or theft, just to make sure our sites are secure. I have a lot of information I brought with me, probably more than you ever want to hear. So at this point, I'll let you ask any questions you may have about the SCADA program.
Jim, you get the first question.
Gee whiz.
You don't want one, huh?
I didn't have it up there, but if you want me to fabricate one, I sure can.
See, and you're reaching. Yeah.
Mine's not working,
Yours not working, okay.
but I do want to say something.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Joel, would this kind of system have detected the water leak that was occurring for 2 years on Willow Creek Road in Rosser?
Absolutely not. This type of software monitors more of our mechanical equipment, our pumps, our motors, our valves, that type of leak there at Willow Creek and Rosser. We contract out through specialized service for them to come in and do a leak detection on it. So this is a different animal, a different tool, I should say.
But Councilwoman, if you had a major leak and you had a pump station, for example, which, as Joel said, was continuously running and effectively couldn't keep the reservoir filled, then that's an example of what this system would announce, if you will, through an alarm.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
And it looks like this is just a nice start, too, right? You're going to be able to build off this system going forward in the future.
What this contract is about here is getting the foundation set up. So when we do build it up, we're building on a solid foundation. There will need to be contracts to implement the actual remote facilities out in the field, but this is kind of the brains of the operation that we're tackling first.
Kind of looks like a crystal ball, actually, doesn't it? Kind of lets you know what's going on in the future. Or lets you know what's going on.
Well, it's Councilman, it's the master plan, as Joel has said. And then it will be a matter of equipping all of these 100+ facilities with detectors and communicating telemetry devices and things like that, and having the panels at various locations which will receive the information and provide the alarms and so forth. So this is more of the master planning and the big picture, which is going to be followed with actually implementation of the modules and devices and things like that.
Sounds like a great tool.
Anyone else, council? Comments from the public? That's a thumbs up. Okay. Ready for a motion?
Mayor, move to award city contract number 2015-068 to Controls West Incorporated for SCADA SciTech services and licensing in the amount not to exceed $45,543.55.
Second.
City.
Let's vote. Charlie, you need to push your button there.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the last item, item G.
Item G is a public hearing for the City of Prescott, Arizona Water and Wastewater Rate Study Report, October 13th, 2014, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes 9-511.01.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And as you'll recall, just over 2 years ago, we entered into our contract for our impact fee, infrastructure improvement plan, and utility rate setting process. And we've been working through that the last several years, mostly the impact fees. We started the rate setting portion of the public process on October 7th with a presentation by Raf Tellis. Rick Jardine with Raf Tellis is here today as well. With the process, we also had another public meeting on October 14th, again on the evening of October 28th, November 4th during the council meeting, and then November 6th at an evening meeting as well, bringing us to our public hearing, which is today. This is the official public hearing required by state law. The posting of the meetings, the notification to the customers, we posted schedules similar to this, not including earlier meetings, but future meetings at City Hall, on the bulletin boards, at the utility rate windows, at Public Works and various other public facilities. We also put it on the bills. Everybody's utility bill for the last month has had the meeting today listed on it, as well as publishing it in the newspaper on the 28th of October. And it was, of course, on our website since September. We put the date of this meeting on our website, trying to make sure the public was aware of it, make sure they were available. On our website also, we have a lot of information related to the study. We have the rate report itself, which is 180 pages with appendix of wonderful reading. We have a Q&A document that we put together based on comments that we've gotten from the public, which is available on the website, as well as each of the presentations that were used at these various meetings over the last 2 months. The remaining process, as I mentioned today, is the public hearing. It's important that we hear from the public on these things. Rick Jardine with Raf Tellis is here. We're going to go through just a few slides to get the rate structure out there. So we'll have that, not the full presentation, but because we want to get to the public comments and be able to talk about those. And then based on council direction today, we'll bring an ordinance related to the rates back at a future council meeting, probably December 2nd. With that, I will turn it over to Rick, and we can go through the slides really quickly.
Mark, I think what we'll do is let's go ahead and go through the presentation, and if the council has questions during the presentation, let's go ahead and ask them, and then we'll go to the public, and which may prompt some additional questions from the council. So take off.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. My name is Rick Giardina with Raf Tellis Financial Consultants, and it's a pleasure to appear before council and the public again this afternoon. As Mark has indicated, we want to keep this as a relatively high-level summary of where we've been and the rates that council is going to be asked to consider in ordinance form. So a quick review of our current rate structure, and as I've shared with you in the past, we have a traditional two-part rate structure. Two-part in the sense that there's a fixed component that is shown on the left-hand side of this page. It's called a base charge. This is something that customers pay regardless of water usage per month. As the meter sizes increase, the fee increases. Shown on the right-hand side is what we refer to as our consumption charge, or our volumetric portion. And this is based on the amount of metered water as consumed by each customer. It's an inverted block rate approach, which simply means that the more water that is used, the higher the unit cost, moving across tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those tiers are tailored to the type of customer that uses that water, starting with our single-family, multifamily, and then the tiers change based on meter size. A 4-inch customer is going to customarily use a lot more water than a smaller-sized customer. So it's tailored to our customers. And then on the lower right-hand side, lower left-hand side, we're showing the current consumption rates across those tiers. And again, as I said, it's an increasing block approach. So at the lowest tier, tier 1, the rate currently is $3.21 for a single-family customer, but as consumption increases and ultimately goes over 20,000 gallons for a single-family customer, that rate increases to over $14.49. The differences in the unit cost across the different types of customers are a reflection of the customer class cost of service. We also have some other fees that we assess, and those are shown on the lower right-hand side. An alternative water fee. We have a surcharge for customers that are located outside of the city. So as part of this study, we were asked to update, have a look at, and assess each and every one of these fees. The financial plan that was prepared for water, that's a reflection of the infrastructure and operational and maintenance costs associated with providing water service, indicate that in order to maintain the financial integrity of the water fund and operate it as a business, as has been customary here in Prescott, that we need to increase revenues by 2% for each of the next 5 years. So our base charge we're showing here today and what it would look like for each of the next 5 years if increased by 2%. We were asked to look at a couple different rate alternatives, and here we're talking about the volumetric rate, the water rate that's assessed based on the amount of metered water use. We considered 2 alternatives and presented those to council over the course of the last couple of months. There was an indication or a strong preference towards alternative 1, which was essentially maintaining the existing rate structure, maintaining those tiered usage volumes, but adjusting the unit prices so that we could generate 2% more revenue. The base charge gives us some of that revenue. The volumetric rates give us the other portion of our revenue. So we've updated those pricing points, and you can see here that the tiers, the usage tiers, have not changed. Again, that was alternative 1. The unit cost for the amount of water used in each tier is shown here, starting with our current, and then the tiers, the unit prices that would be necessary to do 2 things. Number 1, when we look at the volume revenue from each of the customer classes, they would assist us in generating 2% more revenue. We're not increasing each of the customer classes' volume rates in a uniform manner, going back to what I said about the customer class cost of service. Typically, in those years between cost of service analyses, the cost by class can deviate from what is indicated as the cost of service. And that happened here in Prescott. It happens in almost every community in the 4 or 5 years or even longer between cost of service studies. So we had presented to council a transition period where over the next 3 years we would get to class cost of service. So if you do the simple math of how the single family rate increases, that's going to be different than the multifamily, than the non-residential, because we're trying to achieve our class cost of service 3 years out. And so we're going to get there in a pace that was deemed acceptable rather than trying to correct it overnight. We're also proposing to implement for the first time an aquifer protection fee to generate monies to deal with water quality issues and set this up in a separate fund. So we're showing what that fee would be. Again, it's going to be a fixed charge by meter size and proposing to increase it 2% per year. Shifting to wastewater. Went through a similar process. We looked at your existing rate structure. Today, residential customers pay a flat charge of $19.07 per month. Non-residential also pay a flat charge, and then we assess a volume rate based on average monthly winter consumption. We look at that wintertime period as being a reasonable indicator of the amount of water that gets returned to the sewer system, as opposed to looking at, for example, summertime use, where we have a lot of outdoor water use that doesn't find its way to the system, to the sewer system. So we use that average monthly winter consumption, and that's the amount that is used for billing under the volume rate. And again, you see the volume rates vary by customer class. Again, an indication of the cost associated with serving each class. And the differences here really relate to the strength of the wastewater that's put into the system, or in simple terms, how dirty that wastewater is. And different classes discharge different quality of wastewater. And the costs here are an indication of the treatment cost associated with treating that water and bringing it to our permit levels for discharge. So we're proposing no change in the rate structure, but the financial plan for wastewater, again, to maintain the financial integrity of the wastewater fund, indicated that we need revenue increases starting next year of 9%, followed by 5% in 16, 5% in 17, and then nominal increases of 1% each year in 18 and 19. So we're proposing across-the-board increases, we're proposing increases that reflect the cost of service, and like water, we're out of alignment today with regard to class cost of service. And like water, we're proposing to get into alignment over a 3-year period. So we're not necessarily increasing all rates by 9% in the first year. Some classes rates will go up higher, others lower, but overall we will be generating 9% more revenue next year. So all this discussion about rates is very useful. We absolutely have to have it with regard to producing our ordinance. But what I wanted to show you was the impact on a typical customer or typical customers. So here we've got a chart that shows the water and wastewater monthly bill combined for, at the top, we're showing a customer that uses 5,000 gallons of water, has 5,000 gallons of wastewater discharge. Today their bill is approximately $76. When we go through the cost of service analysis and the increase in the rates, that bill for next year would increase about 7% to $81, about a $5 increase. And then you can see for the following 2 years. And the reason we're showing this 3-year impact is the ordinance that you will be considering has rates for the next 3 years. So we're looking to have council adopt that 3-year rate plan. A year from now, council can come back and revisit that. There's nothing that locks your hands, but we're asking you to consider this 3-year ordinance today, or I'm sorry, in December. The other customer that's shown here, we're showing a higher volume of water use and wastewater discharge, and you can see that that increase is 3.8% for that typical for that customer profile, and then the other years are about 2.5% each of those years. And for this particular customer, it's an increase of about $12 in the first year. We also prepared, in response to council's questions, some profiles for non-residential customers. And you can see here the same kind of presentation we're showing for a lower volume non-residential customer, a 2-inch meter using 24,000 gallons of water and having an average winter water consumption of 15,000 gallons. Their bill today is about $214, increasing approximately 8% in the first year to $230. And then for 2 other customer types using substantially more water, you can see how their bills would be impacted under this rate proposal. With that, I know, Mayor, that was a quick run through. This is information that we've shared with you before. And we're very anxious, as Mark has indicated, to get to questions from the public, but starting with questions from council at your discretion, Mayor.
Anyone here before we go to the public? Okay. Comments from the public? Okay. Good afternoon, Howard.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Howard Mechanic, Bloom Place, Prescott. And I just want to start with one question for Rick. In response to, at the last meeting he was here, at a response to Gene's question regarding whether water rates should be used as an incentive for economic development. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. My recollection is that he said that's a bad idea, to use water rates as an incentive for economic development.
Let's see if Jean, was that your question?
Yeah, I asked if we could use build-in water rebates for economic incentives.
And I believe Rick said that wasn't a good idea, if you remember that. Now, in the questions and answers that was published in response to one of my written questions, he states, in asking about Prescott's individual circumstance in determining the rate for treated effluent, which I've talked about before. And he states that Prescott should consider its own circumstances, which extend beyond the price of water and effluent to its overall economy and competitiveness. We're supposed to set rates based on our overall economy, whatever that is, and competitiveness. So my question is, how is that different? How are we using water rates, or how should we use water rates to stimulate the economy or competitiveness? Water rates, as you know, this is a enterprise fund. We have to cover our costs. That's basically what it's about, our costs plus a financial reserve. The water rates are not set and should not be set considering other communities' prices, because they have individual circumstances. So my question is for Rick initially is can you please explain how we should use our rates for the economy and competitiveness?
Mayor, I think the purpose of the public hearing is to receive comments on the presentations and the materials that have been presented. There is a line beyond which, as a matter of procedure, questions, simple questions, certainly can be entertained, but beyond a certain point, when we talk about all the complexities of these issues and so forth, the public hearing is to receive statements primarily.
Okay, that being said, where there are questions, what will be our procedure to try to get some answers back?
Well, Mayor, questions have been asked, and we have repeated those questions on the city website and provided answers to those questions. And so if the council would like some explanation, for example, on what it means to respond to a question, a particular question, or what the answer on the city website means, then we can certainly answer that for the city council.
Okay, Jean, you have your light on. Is that false alarm or you?
No, I had a number of comments to make, but I'll go to my comment about economic incentives. I was reading the minutes from the last meeting as well, and I really disagree with our consultant that we can't or shouldn't use water rates as an economic incentive. I think we can. I think the general law is that we can, and there should be a way where we could give a temporary or short-term rebate to a new industry which comes into our community. Now, the consultant's answer was it wouldn't be fair to the other ratepayers if we did that, because they would be absorbing the cost. But we did get a very good memo from our city attorney on that topic. And one idea in that memo was you could use monies from the general fund to provide economic incentives. How does the money get into the general fund? Well, as a general rule, and we don't know if this would hold up in Arizona, we can charge rates that actually have a profit built into them and put that profit into the general fund, right, and then cycle that back to new industries that will bring in higher paying jobs, jobs with benefits, and more stability to our economy.
And as you know, I commented that I don't have a problem if the council and the community want to provide an incentive to anyone for good reason out of the general fund. I do have a problem with incentivizing the use of water, which goes against conservation, and we should never, in City of Prescott, incentivize or reduce the price of water to any customer. If you want to give it out of the general fund, I don't have any concern about that, except on specific cases maybe. Now, let me just make a statement then, since maybe this is not time for questions. I brought up the point at last meeting regarding the effluent, sales of effluent, and people may wonder, why is this a big deal to me? That a couple of golf courses are paying one third of the price that your consultant is saying is a reasonable price for treated effluent. And I mentioned at your question what that water could be used for, to provide a community of 6,000 to 8,000 people, plus all the commercial non-residential uses. That's how much water is going there. Another thing I didn't mention was that the dollar amount that they're paying below what your consultant is saying is a reasonable price is approximately $750,000 per year. Now that money, where's that money coming from? Why should we be concerned if somebody's getting a good price on water? As you know, it's an enterprise fund. If somebody is paying less, then somebody else is paying more. We have to balance it out. Now, who's paying more to cover this $750,000? The other ratepayers. Let's take Antelope Hills. That's $500,000 a year that they're getting below what your consultant says is a reasonable price. $500,000 comes approximately $22 for each account. Each account is paying $22 more, approximately, to cover that shortfall, to keep the golf course paying a low price, which is interfering with conservation. If they were paying a reasonable price, I think they'd up their concern about water conservation. That's another reason. So I think we need to consider that, those facts. The question I had in writing, and I got an answer, as I explained to you, I thought the price of treated effluent is close to the value of potable water, because all you have to do is put it in the ground and you get 95% back in potable water. So I asked, based on that fact, isn't it reasonable to say that that water, treated effluent that's being sold a 90% price, he's charged 10% less than potable water, is that reasonable under our special circumstances here, that it's almost as valuable as treated water? The consultant did not say it was unreasonable to say 90% is a price. But he had computed 70%. And this 70%, where did the 70% come from? Well, if you ever make a statement based on false assumptions, then you have to question the statement. What were the two false assumptions? One is that the golf courses could use potable water instead, and I clarified that at the last meeting. That was an incorrect assumption on the part of the consultant, as your financial director confirmed. The second incorrect assumption that came up with a 70% number was that the city needs to promote the use of effluent. The city does not need to promote the use of effluent or potable water. As we clarified, there's ample use for that treated effluent to put in the ground and use it either for new development or to alleviate our overdraft. So it's a very valuable commodity. There's no reason for the city to promote it. Two major assumptions that was incorrect, coming up to a 70% figure. No disagreement with my number of 90% that's based on Prescott's specific circumstances. So I would, at the last meeting, I didn't think that was the time to get into the golf course issue. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on the golf course issue. I requested at that time that the city consider having a discussion either at the Water Issues Committee or at the council or some other public venue. And so, and I followed up with an email. Is that reasonable to have this discussion at a public hearing of some type in the city so we can discuss this issue of the 2 golf courses paying 1/3 of the rate that your consultant figures is reasonable? Is that something reasonable to have a discussion on this issue sometime?
Yeah. Harold, I realize that it appears that you're asking me directly all these questions. And,
well, you are the chair of the Water Issues
yeah.
Committee. You are the chair of the Water Issues Committee.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
You can't put something on the agenda for the council?
Well, yeah, I or any 2 councilmen can put anything on the agenda.
Okay, well, that's what I'm asking.
But again, I want to emphasize that I'm assuming you're talking to the entire council.
Yes, I am.
To ask these questions. And I think if the council so desires, that in due time, we're noting the questions. And I'm not sure that they will be answered because, again, it takes 4 votes. Whether all of these questions will be answered in a timely manner that will precede the vote on this particular water study. I don't know what the thinking is of the other people, and I don't have any lights on, so apparently I'm not getting any thoughts at the moment.
I have
so
one.
This is something that may find its way into the cloud. I'm not sure. Yeah, but Jim's coming on.
I'd like to ask our consultant if he could explain again how he came up with the 70% and why it shouldn't be 90% charge for effluent.
Yeah, and we're getting into some areas that probably is not appropriate for this. But go ahead. Let's see how far we get.
I think as Mr. Mechanic has illustrated for us, this is a very complex issue. The 90% is not based in science. The 70% is not based in science. Okay? When it comes to charging for treated effluent, there are a variety of factors that could be considered. Often, the fact that we have reclaimed water or treated wastewater that can be reclaimed and used, for many communities, it's a treatment solution or a discharge solution, that we don't have a stream, a body of water that we can discharge into. Now, in the case here in Prescott, what we're doing is we're creating a resource. As has been observed, we can take that treated effluent, we can pump it into the aquifer, develop recharge credits, and then we pull that out and we can use that then to serve the golf courses. Or we can do the direct reuse like we're doing now for the golf courses. One where, in some communities, the argument is made that's a lower quality of water, and hence we shouldn't charge the treated, the potable water rate. Okay? I can't think, I'm certain there's some out there, but I can't think of a community that charges 100% of the treated water rate for reclaimed water.
Goodyear, Arizona.
Okay? There's one. It's not commonly done in the industry because of what I said in terms of there's a view that it's a lower quality of water. You could, in fact, adopt that policy because you already have a bit of a leverage in that you require golf courses to take treated effluent. So regardless of what you charge, they have to take it. The notion here is that it's a lesser quality of water, and that's one reason for not charging 100% of the treated water rate. So, and I don't want to appear as if I'm being wishy-washy on this, but it isn't a cost of service driven goal for most communities. It's the idea that we have some flexibility as a community in terms of the treated effluent that we're able to produce and our ability to meet other demands. And by providing this water to golf courses, we're freeing up treated water sources for customers who cannot use reclaimed water, essentially expanding our portfolio. That's one reason from a philosophical standpoint to charge a lesser amount. That reason is mitigated if you have a requirement that says you must use it. Regardless of whether it's a lower quality of water or not, you as a golf course must use it. Tucson has this policy. Large irrigated areas, golf courses must take treated effluent. And their goal over the past 10 to 15 years has been to, over time, move towards the indicated cost of service for that. And so starting years ago, they might have been at 60, 70% of treated water rate. And over the years, they've migrated and are approaching 100% of that treated water rate.
Yeah.
So it has an awful lot to do with philosophy. You have contracts with at least one of your golf courses now that governs the price. And you won't have an opportunity to change that until that contract opens. Yeah. But your other customer you don't have a contract with. So long-winded answer, Mayor. There's not a divided by B that gets you to the answer.
Yeah. Well, as my understanding is that we hired you to do a study for us and give us some recommendations and back it up with whatever data that you think is appropriate. Ultimately, these 7 people will get to vote. You don't get to vote, okay? And Howard, unfortunately, you don't get to vote. But there will be 7 votes that will vote on this after we get it all tied together. I still have lots of questions, and we've still got some time to go on it. But as Craig says, and I appreciate, today we're taking public comment, and we'll sift that through. And on December 2nd, we'll be talking about how we vote.
Mayor, may I comment for just a moment? If the subject is treated effluent and the use of treated effluent and the pricing of treated effluent, there are 2 primary moving parts of significance. Number 1 is the city has a long-term contract with Prescott Lakes, which is renewable. And so that contract provides pricing and pricing adjustments, CPI and so forth. There's really nothing we can do. That's a contract of record. So the council would not, through this or next rate setting process, try to unilaterally modify that contract by setting a higher rate for effluent. So setting that aside, because again, it is a matter of long-term contract, that leaves us with Antelope Hills, which is the other major user of effluent. And that, as has been pointed out many times, the pricing of effluent for Antelope Hills, and that pricing is effectively set at the Prescott Lakes private golf club contract rate. But certainly the council does have the prerogative to set a different rate for Antelope Hills. That's really what we're talking about here if we're talking about the pricing of effluent. The other factors, the local economy, all of that is very complex and interconnected. There's no way during a rate-setting process, and certainly real time, we're going to do an economic analysis of what the impact of the golf course used to be before we put it out of business by tripling the cost of effluent. The fact of the matter is that whether it's water or wastewater rates, whether it's trash collection, whether it's the general fund and so forth, but primarily in the general fund and to a certain extent in the utilities funds, where there is any connection to tourism, effectively those tourists are buying down the cost of public services in the city of Prescott. So if we have issues in the general fund, our tourists are helping us deal with those issues in the general fund because they're visiting and paying. If we have golfers, if we have economic activity associated with the golf courses, that economic activity is generating money in our local economy, and so there's an interconnection here. If you kill the golden goose, it doesn't lay eggs anymore. Am I suggesting that the golf course is the golden goose? I am not. But what I am saying is that the local economy is connected and interconnected in ways that at the end of the day, when the policy decision is made, it's not just what the price of effluent is, it's the correlation and the relationship of the economic activity developed and contributing to our economy by everything to which it is connected. And so it's much more complex, and that's why it's a matter of policy. With respect to economic development, it may be possible to offer economic initiatives. We're not offering them. We're not recommending to the council that you do that. If you have that tool, as a matter of policy, you may decide in some particular case to exercise that tool. But for the purpose of this rate-setting process, we're just not recommending that.
Okay. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Palladini, you and I have had conversation with regards to you becoming intimately aware of the contractual agreements regarding water, number one. Number two, with resolutions that were passed with regards to water and quality of water that's used on golf courses in the city limits of Prescott. And I'm sure you are very much aware of what those are as we breathe and speak today. My comment at this point doesn't have anything to do with that, because I think Mr. McConnell explained that very well. We have a community asset that's a multi-million-dollar asset that we are responsible for by policy to maintain. We leased out the O&M of other facility, you know, the restaurant, the bar, the clothes store, stuff like that. But through our Parks and Rec department, we chose as a council to maintain that golf course. So the condition of that golf course belongs to this council. It belongs to the people of the city of Prescott. We own it. And we don't want that piece of infrastructure to go to dust simply because they can't afford to buy effluent and destroy a multi-million-dollar facility in the process to try and promote using something different in the way of water. So it's a comment with regards to that. John, have I missed anything in our obligation to the public with regards to a multi-million-dollar asset?
Well, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and Council, there's a couple of policies here. Well, first of all, there is the Prescott Lakes contract, which is pretty much in 50 years more of the term. It has rate adjustments based on inflation, and that's about it. There are some. There's a provision in there that talks about if there's a change in regulation that has a direct impact on treatment of effluent, which really would be the Sundog plant, then that proportionate share can be passed on. It's my understanding from the wastewater folks that there hasn't been any regulatory impact on the cost directly related to the cost of effluent. So that cost is pretty much fixed unless and until there's some direct regulatory impact. So there was a policy then adopted a number of years ago that the Antelope Hills Golf Course would have essentially what's called favored nation status, that it would receive the same or would pay the same rate for effluent, for treated effluent, to water the Antelope Hills Golf Course as did any other golf course that was purchasing effluent by contract, in other words, Prescott Lakes. So that's been the policy of the council. The council could certainly change that policy or change that, I guess. It was really a management decision. I guess the council could override that management decision with a policy change and charge a higher rate to Antelope Hills. However, we have a contract with an operator of Antelope Hills, which is sort of a split operation. We have the obligation to maintain the golf course, which includes obviously watering. So there's really, if you're going to increase the cost of the maintenance, there's two ways to deal with it. You can pass that back through to the green fees and the rates paid by the users of the golf course. And as we know in basic economics, there's a point of diminishing return, and the operator is only obligated to provide you know, a certain amount of revenue, at which point, if it doesn't, it has a couple of choices. It can basically quit or pay differences. And the other option is that the golf course operations would be subsidized by the general fund. So you're sort of just circling back and around. If you raise the effluent rates on Antelope Hills, ultimately you're going to, in order to continue to operate it at its current and growing level, more than likely, in order to maintain the existing operations contract with Billy Casper Golf, you would probably have to then subsidize it out of the general fund, because the city maintains that obligation under that contract. There has an obligation under the contract to maintain the golf course, and part of that maintenance is the cost of watering. So ultimately, as Craig was saying, it is a policy. It would ultimately be a policy decision. You could certainly raise the effluent rates on Antelope Hills. You can't on Prescott Lakes, but you have to pay for it somehow. And generally speaking, that payment is going to come out of a general fund subsidy in order to continue the contract we have with Billy Casper Golf.
Thank you for your explanation. Charlie, you're the new Water Issues Committee Chair, so to get right to the point with Mr. Mechanic, do you see a reason to have this meeting or this discussion again?
As far as the golf course goes, until we have at least 12 months under our belt with Billy Casper and understanding where the revenue is, because we've got a $4.5 million deficit to the general fund already, I'm hard pressed. But Howard, you and I have spoken about this, and clearly effluent rates are something that we have to address. We're starting. This is step one. But if we have 12 months under our belt with the new management structure and we're seeing that the golf course is going in the right direction, I'd be willing to look at it at that point to address Antelope Hills rates. I have not yet reviewed the contract related to Prescott Lakes and the inflation numbers and the CPI. That's coming. It's on my list for my reading over Thanksgiving. But that would be my commitment there, is we need to know where Antelope Hills is, because we've been subsidizing it to the tune of $300,000 a year out of the general fund. And our goal is to get away from that. Right. At a certain point in time, it may be in a position itself to start looking at changing the effluent rates. But we've got to have those 12 months behind us.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't come here to have a discussion. Like I said, I thought the discussion should be elsewhere, and this is not the place or the time to discuss the contract, which is and I disagree with the analysis of the contract with Prescott Lakes. There is a clause in there, and we can discuss that clause and what it means. But this is not the time or place to discuss the contract or tourism at Antelope Hills and how much it brings into the economy. That's not for this. But I appreciate Charlie's statement there. And when is that year up?
It'll be about April.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll be able to discuss it then and get it behind us. If there's a public discussion and the public doesn't want to raise the rates, then I'll go away.
Thank you.
I brought the issue, and I think it needs a discussion. That's
Chris,
all. I just want to discuss it.
Yeah, Chris, did you want to respond to something?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Mr. Mechanic, the last 2 times we've heard you, you would think that you were trying to help Prescott maximize its revenue stream. And I just want to hear what you hope, if what you're suggesting happens and that rate gets to 90%, what in black and white do you hope is the ultimate outcome? Is it to close the golf courses and put that water back into recharge? What is your ultimate goal?
No, that is not the goal. The goal is to have water rates at a reasonable level. So if 90% is a reasonable level, which I think it is, if we set it 90%, users of that effluent will be encouraged to conserve more. I think you're going to agree with me that when a commodity is priced higher, there's more incentive to conserve. When it's priced lower, there's much less incentive to conserve by that user. So that's number one. Number two is, if the price goes up to 90%, then there will be a consideration by the city, as Charlie has mentioned, that do we want to subsidize the golf course at $500,000 a year? If we do, then we do. But if we don't, maybe there's another use, and that's the other issue. What is the alternative use that's not going to use water because somebody's paying 1/3 the cost, and the alternative use cannot compete against that subsidy? It could be growth, as I mentioned before. If that water is put to new growth, it could provide for 8,000 new homes. If it's put to safe yield, we could put it in the ground and cut our overdraft considerably. So that's my goal. Have a reasonable price, encourage conservation, and consider other alternative uses of that water. I'm not into closing down the golf course. And I made that clear last meeting. But that's what people are going to assume. I think any user should pay a reasonable cost of water. Just in this case, we're talking about golf courses. But
Thank you very much.
We could be talking about recyclers for that purpose.
Thank you, Howard. Good afternoon.
I'm Barbara Jacobson, a 20-year resident of Prescott, Arizona. I thank you for the readability of that report because I read it on my little phone about a week ago, and I came up with some thoughts as I read it, some of which have been verified again today as I listen. I would ask the council when they look at this to consider that we do live in a desert, that we are leaning towards needing to conserve, and many of us have learned to do that. I would love for people to get to the 35 gallons per day per person. You ever look at your water bill? Probably not anywhere near that. But conservation is really what we need to do. I think in this report, it's suggesting that we raise the rates on the lowest water users, the lowest residential water, water users, and that is the people who are conserving the most. We raise their price. I disagree with that. I also want you to make sure that this money, the extra revenue that's made, is used for maintenance and repairs. I got the feeling from reading it that that was the gist, that it was needed for maintenance and repairs. We have an old system. Not that it gets used for an additional pipeline. It's not clear in there, but I want to make sure it's used for maintenance and repairs. The aquifer protection part is really kind of fuzzy to me as I read that. What does that mean, and what are you going to do? It wasn't clear to me at all. And I did write a note that the effluent rate needs to be increased. If we need additional money, I think that effluent rate needs to be increased. And today, sitting here, I'm wondering, are you all voting on a study, or are you voting on a proposal? Or does this study then become the proposal that you're going to vote on? And if so, I ask you to consider a lot of these variables. Consider the general plan, consider our core values as a community, and exactly what we're looking at, because water is a very essential part of our community. Yeah. It's not just a water rate increase.
Well, let me clarify that the study is leading toward a proposal
okay,
that the council will vote on.
In the next 2 weeks.
December 2nd.
2nd, yeah.
Yeah, that will make 4 different public meetings. And there's been some more on top of that that were held here at City Hall. And I think one of the public meetings there was 6 people here, and maybe one of the meetings there was 1 person. Okay. So sometimes it's difficult to get everybody out.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't make any of those meetings, but this is what I pulled out from what I read, and I ask you to consider those points. Thanks.
Yeah. Now let's keep moving forward.
And Mayor, just one clarification. The study does have essentially a proposal. That's the outcome. The study says this is what is being recommended for the council to do. So those findings are the proposal. Okay. Can we just get a clarification on the aquifer protection fee? Just a quick, this again is why we're looking at it and what it's for.
What it is, yeah.
Because that should be an easy one for us to describe. Somewhat easy in a rate.
Yeah, it's not so much the fee, it's what's going to happen with the money, I think.
And everything that is coming into here has to be related to the enterprise fund. So it has to be related to either the water fund or the wastewater fund. So it's not charging money to go spend on something unrelated to water or wastewater. Okay.
And Councilman, as you said, there's an explanation of the dedication of the fund to implement other measures to achieve, maintain water quality mandated by state and federal law.
It's restricted. We just had a test an analysis done by ADEQ on our reservoirs.
Yeah,
They're not lakes, they're reservoirs. They hold water.
yeah.
There's many, many years of sediment in those lakes. They have issues with them. They have poor water quality. This aquifer protection plan fee is to offset the recommendations, which are going to be tied to expenses of what we have to do to bring those lakes to a standard of quality for surface use and recharge into the aquifer.
So they will be cleaned up, is
That
what you're saying?
At
is
some
what
point
this
in
is
time,
for.
yes, they will.
Okay.
They're going to have to by state and federal law.
When the money builds up, I take it?
Well, we
by
don't
the
know
fee?
we don't know what the call is, and it's probably a myriad of thing, whether it's aerification, putting air back into the water and to get rid of the blue-green algae and those things. There's a lot of different recommendations that are being digested right now, so the total outcome of what we're going to do is still up in the air. But we
Okay.
know we have to address it. We know we have to have a funding source, and this is the funding
Okay.
source.
And I was hopeful for that. Again, this is just kind of, it's pretty general, and it's a little vague on specifics. That's all.
This problem that Steve is speaking to was part of a findings of a committee 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, and I remember.
And the committee recommended that time that we start then of collecting a fee so that we could grow money. And when we reached a point that we had enough money to do a project, that we could. And we're finally getting around to that.
Yes, good.
And it's well overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm
Hello.
Chuck Buttinger. I live at 1802 Short Line Lane, and I was part of that committee that
Yes, you
was
were.
talking about the aquifer protection fee. And that's what I'm here to specifically talk about is the aquifer protection fee, because I think the wording, like Barbara said, is a little vague. It doesn't really direct funding where it needs to go. I think it should be better defined to focus efforts to better meet the compliance to the Clean Water Act, and it's too vague for administration of effective implementation. So I have come up with some recommendations. I think the name should be changed to the watershed protection fee, not an aquifer protection fee, because as Steve was saying, he immediately started talking about lakes. This is a surface water issue. The TMDL is a surface water issue, that sort of thing. So I think it should be called what we intend to use the money for, which is watershed protection. The second thing is, I believe, to eliminate the vagueness of it, is to maybe specify the facilities and types of projects that should be spelled out for the watershed protection, such things as floodplain acquisition, construction of stormwater retention basins, restoration of wetlands and riverbanks, known as riparian areas, improvements to water, urban landscaping using infiltration and curb cuts, pervious pavement for sidewalks and parking lots, and or actually specifically rainwater harvesting. Basically separate the tasks for wastewater, drinking water supply, and aquifer protection from the watershed facilities and projects. I would also suggest to remove the reference to implementation of other measures necessary to achieve and maintain water quality mandated by state and federal law applicable to recharge assets. I'm not sure the city wants to spend funds mandated or directed by an outside agency not accountable to the taxpayer. I understand and realize what the TMDL is. I've worked on it. I commented on it, as a matter of fact. But I think the wording should sound more like facilities designed and constructed to improve water quality consistent with federal and state standards as defined by scientific criteria using approved methods and techniques, not mandated, not directed. Basically, the way the Clean Water Act is written is to say, we want to achieve this goal. How are you going to do it? So I want the city to be able to say, this is how we want to do it. We have goals, we have desires, we have interests that are not met by ADEQ or the EPA, that sort of thing. And I'm not sure as to the last sentence there, new restricted water sub-fund to be established. I don't know what that means, so if that could be defined. And finally, as you guys have all been talking today, what about the maintenance? Once we start on these facilities, what about the maintenance? I've looked at a couple of the stormwater ponds that have been put in. They're already filling in with sediment, which is a natural thing and what we want to do, because that's one of the impediments to the lakes and to the surface water here. But we need to make sure there's enough money in this fee to cover for maintenance long term and to continue our project to improve water quality. So in my opinion, maybe the 70 cents is too little, which is little.
It's a start.
It's a start.
It's a
but
start.
I did want to mention that maintenance should be included in the watershed protection fee, not the aquifer protection fee.
That's all in writing?
Yes.
You don't have enough whereas in it.
I have no whereas.
No, you've got to add some more.
Would you like to have a copy?
If it's going to be a good result, why don't you leave it with us?
Okay.
And we would like to run it through the system. Yeah. Thanks very much.
And I would agree with maintenance should be part of that.
Yeah, no question.
And Mayor, can we just ask Mark to clarify the question on the restricted fund, just so we can knock that off the list easily?
Sure, that'll be a sub-fund of the water fund like our alt water fund is, so that the uses of the funds can be easily tracked and proven and audit. And maintenance is in the current definition also.
And a follow-up to the question, I don't need an answer today, but I would like to attach it to Chuck's question, was we're talking about, the name of this fund, but I think that we need some clarification about our effluent discharge and state and federal regulations related to that quality and potential issues where this fund may need to be used. I think that should be some clarification provided as well. Thank you.
We get there. Good afternoon.
Hello. This is going to be short and simple. I'm just a citizen of Prescott.
And your
I've lived
name?
here 12 years. My name is Denise. I live on Coronado Avenue. And we took a barren piece of property that was run down, planted a lot of trees, the grass that you have on the courthouse, and I think we added to the beauty of Prescott. People drive by and they make comments to me. I come by your house purposely because it makes me feel good. And Prescott has an atmosphere. And why I'm here today is I would like to maintain my yard. My water bill is over $200 a month now in the summertime. And I see on my neighbors are one by one turning to rocks, artificial grass, and kind of breaks my heart to see the face of Prescott being changed that way. I have all kinds of animals, birds, bees, wildlife in my yard. And I think that adds to our atmosphere. And I'm just afraid raising the water rates, I don't want to rock over my yard. I think I add to the beauty of this planet by doing what I do. And I feel like I'm kind of being penalized. We're retired, and I don't know if we can maintain what we would like to retain in our property, and if our water rates keep on going up. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
And Mayor, could I just add on, I think there's other options to rocking over as well. This last weekend, I went on a tour put on by CWAG that explored native plants, low water usage, landscaping, and there's a huge variety out there that you can use. So, I know what you have, you love, and it's probably beautiful, but I mean, just to say, we're going to rock over, I don't necessarily think you have to do that. I mean, I went and witnessed that there's other options and other kind of trees that you could be use, and you could channel your rainwater off your roof to go into a tank to pump to do that. There's other options. I think we just got to get very creative with how we conserve our water.
Leslie Hoy, 1880 Coyote Road. Thank you, Councilman Kukniel.
And also, I would encourage the public that's watching and is worried about rocking over their yards to consult the city's website, the Water Smart section, that has beautiful galleries of what you can do with low water use landscaping. I've spoken at the 2 of the previous hearings, so I don't want to go over that ground, but I was confused today when I was looking at the suggested water rates. I thought that with alternative 1 there was going to be some kind of incentive for the higher users to conserve, but I didn't see that. So I'd like to know from the consultant whether there was a conservation signal built into the suggested water rates.
Under the city's current rate structure, this tiered approach, there is absolutely an incentive built in, and we are continuing to reinforce that incentive. By way of example, today a customer using a high volume of water would pay $14.49 per 1,000 gallons. That's a huge economic incentive right there. We're in no way mitigating that with the suggested alternative 1 rate increase. As a matter of fact, we're continuing with that because over the 5-year period we looked at, that $14.49 would increase to over $15 per 1,000 gallon.
However, there's a 2%, it's a flat 2% rate increase on all the tiers, but then I also saw in one of your graphs that showed that the lower tiers were going to, I think it was 6.8% overall, we're going to have an increase, and then I looked at the higher tiers and it was 3.8 or something like that. I might be wrong. It seemed like that the lower tiers were getting a higher percentage increase overall than the higher tiers.
The lower volume user, not the tiers. The tier prices are all increasing. What you're seeing is the impact of the increase in the sewer rate of 9% followed by higher increases, the impact that has on a lower volume user, because the sewer bill becomes a higher proportion of the overall utility bill. The water rate structure is continuing to send that strong pricing signal. But when we're raising the sewer bill at a higher percent, that sewer bill then becomes a larger part of the bill for the lower volume user. And that's why you're seeing those higher increases in the overall utility bill.
Okay.
Not the water bill, in the overall utility bill.
Okay, so then, just to clarify, the 2% per year rate on water that you showed is the same for all volume users. Is that correct?
It is not. As we talked about, we're going through a 3-year transition on cost of service. So the actual increase in the unit rates for the different classes is not a uniform 2% per year.
Okay, and you didn't show, did you show that or did you not show that?
Can we go back to the PowerPoint? If you do the math on these different increases in the unit rates, you'll see that for single family, it's not as much as multifamily and non-residential, because today, single family is paying more than their cost of service. So these are not 2% uniform increases for single family, multifamily, and non-residential. Non-residential and multifamily are going up more than 2%.
Okay, then, so why does it say annual percent increase in revenue rates?
We are raising the total revenue of the water fund by 2%.
Oh, okay.
So in simple terms, single family might be going up in the first year 1.5%, but the multifamily and non-residential are going up 2.5%.
So the average is 2%.
Oh, okay. Okay, I get it.
One way to put, yes. If our revenues today in the water fund are $100, next year they're going to be $102. Overall.
Okay.
In total.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Okay, the one other thing I want to talk about briefly is when I was here at the last two hearings, the mayor expressed concern that conservation would be lowering the revenues for the fund. So since that time, I've tried to do a little bit of research, and it's probably too little bit of research on that, but today I sent, or maybe it was yesterday, I sent you all an email with some information that I had gotten from Linda Stitzer from Western Resource Advocates, and I don't know if you were able to look at that yet. Unfortunately, that study didn't come out until this month because it would have been much more useful if it would come out earlier. But you can go to that site and you can see the water rates from every state, and you can also see the water rates for 400 different water companies in Arizona. And then if you use the dashboard, you can play with it and see what will happen yourself to different factors that the water rates would affect. So you can see what happens to revenue. So that could be very useful. And then the last thing I just want to say is that one of the things I found was from the Alliance for Water Efficiency. I don't know who makes that up, but I believe it's a lot of different water companies. And the point I want to make is that efficiency, which is now another word for conservation, is the least expensive source of new supply. Conservation programs can help avoid costs of adding new capacity. So it's over the short term, the revenues may decrease, but over the long term, it will save the water system money. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind. And also, one of the things that they say is that addressing the concern of increasing rates directly, transparently, on an ongoing basis helps customers understand that water rates must go up to cover rising costs, but that conservation will help keep long-term rates down. That's what we really need to think about as a community when we look at this, and I do support increasing the water rates. Thanks.
I did get that, Leslie, but it was this morning, and there's not been...
I know. So it's for...
You know, we're so different here than a lot of places, and so many of these studies look at averages all over. My son lives in Tyler, Texas, and he's involved in some of the activities there. But to get more water, all they do is call the water district and say, ship us another 1,000 acre feet. And boom, here she comes and goes in the lake, and they pump out of the lake. And it's really a simple way to do business. We don't have that option here. Yeah, it's very different.
I agree that it's different, but all over the country, people are looking at conserving because water is a diminishing resource.
Oh, no doubt about it, and no doubt about it. And I appreciate your interest.
You shower with a friend. I'm happy to know that, Councilman Blair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm not sure I can follow that.
There's the alternative water fund right there, standing in front of the podium.
I don't have any water with me right now. I wish I did. Gary Werb, 1638 White Oak Circle. I especially came up to thank you, everyone, especially Councilman Lammerson. I know you've worked really hard on what I call, and I think it still should be called, the watershed improvement fee. My only question is, who's going to implement this program when it passes? And I'm pushing it as hard as anyone else. And will there be an opportunity for public input as we have had in the past? Chuck and I have worked both Vision 2050 Water Committee. Our recommendations are still very, very appropriate for that. I insisted on, when Mayor Jack Wilson was the mayor, that we had that task force, how many years ago, I can't remember, which promoted this watershed improvement fee, and then our committee we had for the lakes or the reservoirs. And then again for the general plan. I have not stopped asking for this fee, and I won't. And if there is opportunity in the future, I would like to be on that committee or any recommendation. But I just want to thank you for bringing this up finally.
Okay. Thanks, Sherry. Who's next? Good afternoon to you. How are you?
My name is Fred Oswald, 1520 Magnolia Lane. I'm a fairly new resident of Prescott, having moved here in the summer of 2013 from Cleveland, which has a lot more water.
Welcome.
And I am concerned about the water conservation. I notice that you do have progressive rates, but I would urge you to make them more progressive, to charge more for people that use a lot of water to encourage conservation. And then also with alternate conservation funds, perhaps you could subsidize water saving measures like rain barrels and things like that to try to make it, urge people to do that so that they don't use as much water. And as far as the goal of 35 gallons a person, I've been tracking my water use for the last several months and been averaging in the low to mid 20 gallons a person for my wife and I. But we have a xeroscopic landscape and rain barrel, and when we rinse vegetables, we catch the water in a bowl and take it out and pour it on plants. So we use very little water outside, and you know, it can be done. So thank you.
Thank you, and we're glad you're here.
Mayor, could I ask a question based on his comment?
Yeah, sir?
It's probably more a question for the city attorney. Does the council have the legal authority to enact a conservation fee as part of our rate structure, the way we're doing an aquifer protection fee?
I'm not really sure what you mean by a conservation fee.
Well, to address the kinds of things this gentleman brought up about subsidizing rainwater harvesting and gray water systems and conservation measures.
I think as a general concept or a general rule, without getting into kind of the specifics, the council or the city could adopt as part of the ordinance an additional type of fee that would be somehow, again, dedicated as a sub-fund for certain purposes. I think there are certain limitations. In other words, every time we adopt a new fee, we have to go through the whole notice process, and all that has to happen. And then how you use it, I think we would need to get into the weeds on sort of what the purpose of the use is, and that may have some limitations, you know. And the argument is it a fee for which you get some benefit back, or is it simply a tax, which is a sort of general application? And so those are the kind of issues we would have to sort of dig into. But as a general concept, the answer is yes. It's not really any different than the aquifer protection or watershed protection fee in a sense. It's dedicated for a certain purpose, and you'd have to have these findings of public benefit in the use of it. But again, I think as a general rule, without getting into the weeds, yeah.
Mark Heron.
Yeah, just to clarify, in our budget each year in the Alternative Water Fund, we do have water conservation incentives and bill credits that people can apply for low-flow toilets, removal of sod, things like that. So that is part of our Water Smart conservation program.
Jim, you had something?
Yeah, number one, thank you for clarifying that, Mark, because we worked real hard to get that implemented too. But specifically for Mr. McConnell, if I'm not mistaken, and I've read all this stuff to answer Mr. Wabb's question, when we pass these new water rates, we have built into the new water rates the aquifer protection, the watershed savior, whatever you want to call something. When we do it, it takes effect January 1, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, if it's passed on the 2nd of December, it would take effect on January 2nd, 30 days later, if my math is correct.
That's January 1st.
Okay, this January, I don't do math.
30 days have September.
30 days.
And just to clarify that,
You may get in this, you may not, Mark. Go ahead.
The water fees, the new water rates would be effective January 1. The bills for the water usage all through January are in February, so it would not be on until the February bills.
Okay. Because we're paying in arrears.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Matson. And by the way, on that 35 gallons per person per month, my wife and I are significant per day. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my wife and I are significantly less than half of that. So it is possible to do major conservation. So anyway, I was looking through this sheet and I noticed on slide 9, your restaurants, let's see, okay, restaurant, 628, 628, 628, 628, 628, and then all of the non-residential users end up at 629 at the end. Are we overcharging restaurants by so much, or, I mean, that to me stuck out as a little odd. Is there a reason for it?
Yes. We've been moving over the last 8 years. 8 years ago, I believe we had like 18 different wastewater rates, which is extremely difficult to administer because you have businesses that are not necessarily clear-cut in any one area. So we've been working to come up with a standard non-residential rate, moving all the rates to that as the rates catch up. So that's why by 2019, if all these rates go in place, all the non-residential would be at the 629.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. That takes no action. Go ahead, Chris.
I just want to say, and I want to preface this with being a wacky idea, but I'm going to throw it out there for engineering anyway. But with some engineering, could the lakes at the golf course be also used as recharge ponds? You don't got to answer that. Just think on it. I didn't know if we could do that or not, but that'd be killing two birds with one stone. And I just think, Public Works has got a plan for the next 50 years. We need to fix our system, and that costs money. When we had Willow Creek and Rosser spewing for that long, we can't do that. That costs us a lot of money. This plan's a start. It helps fix infrastructure, and it rewards conservation. So I'm glad to see us moving forward, and thank you, everybody, for coming out on it.
Okay, thanks for being here.
Mayor, wait. I just want to say, I feel like we're on a runaway train, and we're on a track that we can't make any changes. If we have to adopt an ordinance on December 2nd, how and when are we going to incorporate all the comments from the public and actually get an ordinance that we might be able to agree on, discuss and agree? There have been a lot of good ideas that have come forth just today, others through the email. I think we need more time to consider the development of an ordinance. Is there some drop-dead, legally mandated reason why we have to start this January 1st?
The answer to that is no. January 1st is not a drop-dead date. On the other hand, there are requirements for the public report. You have the public report. The rate study is and has become the recommendation to you. If the council wishes to have additional discussion and so forth, it needs to be narrowed from the general to the specific. Because at the end of the day, an ordinance has to be passed with criteria, with numbers, with fine print. So if someone, for example, is commenting that I'd like to see a steeper conservation rate, then what's needed is for a specific proposal on a steeper conservation rate. You have the staff recommendation. If someone comes in and presents a specific proposal, we will analyze that proposal and advise the council. But we are at the point in the proceedings where it needs to be specific, not general.
Yeah. Craig, where I think we're at on that is we have a long-range plan of replacing and maintaining our systems. And that's in a capital plan. And this rate study is giving us the track to run on to be able to do that, because we'll take in that much money with this rate structure. Am I correct? We didn't put all numbers out of the air. We had an outcome that we needed to reach before we get there. So I think it's important that we make sure that we have enough money to keep on our capital plan. But if we need to tweak some of these other things along the way, why certainly. we should do that. But I think that we have a responsibility to maintain our system and stay on track with our capital improvements. And this rate study does that, as I understand it.
This rate study will, is projected, like all rate studies do, to generate the operating revenue to support maintenance operations and the capital improvement program. And the capital improvement program, as you point out, is a multi-year program consisting of specific projects.
Well,
and so from a rate standpoint, you can arrive at the same revenue being generated, but you can do that in a different way. And that's, an example of that is when Mr. Giardina, suggested alternative 1 or alternative 2. They both funded and kept the projects on track. But there are different ways to do that. If you raise the highest tier of non-residential water use, for example, and lowered some other tiers, you could generate the same number of the same amount of revenue. But again, I would suggest that no, like any rate setting process, there's nothing magic about these numbers, but they do represent what the policy has been. They do reflect what a conservation rate might look like here and other places. But, if in fact there is a suggestion that there are other adjustments as a matter of policy that you would like to see made, then we'll need to see what those are specifically, and then we would run the model again, which is just a very detailed assortment of interconnected analytical tools, and find out whether we still have enough revenue, we don't have enough revenue, whatever. But that's where the policy comes in.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
If we went ahead and did as suggested based upon the money we spent in the public meetings and the rate structure to keep our capital projects online, and we feel like in the future, let's say this study is a 5-year study, in the future within a year's time we figure out that the fee for the aquifer protection is not enough, can we come back in year 2 or 6 months later to make a change to this policy and raise that specific part of the plan?
Well, I think you could do that. You could, if you have a particular rate and you want to restrict, the rate, the rate study to that particular rate to reflect new information, more specificity with respect to projects and so forth. I would think you could do that, but you still have to do it according to the prescribed rate structure, which is laid out.
Yeah, and I think
the procedure.
I wouldn't tend to speak for Gene, but I understand that, even though we pass this thing, there are things that we can consider and make adjustments and not be stuck to a 5-year plan if we feel something's so necessary to change.
Well, and there is some flexibility within the water fund to make adjustments along the way. It's been remarked today that some people would like to see more specificity to what's called the aquifer protection fee, what projects and so forth. Well, if you look at the capital improvement program, you'll see a specific project sheet in there which responds to that by saying, we have not received the TMDL from ADEQ. When we receive the TMDL, then we will look at alternatives for meeting that TMDL, look at the feasibilities of those, and that's where the public dialogue will come in, because it's going to be a big ticket item. Believe me, there will be a lot of discussion because there will be alternative ways to address that.
And I absolutely believe in, based upon the dashboard that came out with ADEQ, and the things that you can look at year to year, we should be looking at tweaking this policy, if necessary, to raise or lower the rates based upon this group's opinion of what's important, and not just say we're going to do it every 5 years.
But I don't want everybody to leave thinking that if we need $10,000 more in aquifer protection to implement a technology, that we necessarily have to go through a whole full-blown rate process, because within the water fund we have the ability to borrow from here and put here. It's all water. It's all public purpose.
Right.
But if aquifer protection is a separately accounted sub-fund, then we can loan money from the other sub-funds to that fund and then pay it back. So there is some flexibility without having to go through the bureaucratic, multi-month, very expensive rate study every time you want to make a minor adjustment in what your project may be.
Well, I think that's what I wanted to hear, is that we have the ability, once again, to have the flexibility to change things without going through that multiple layer of bureaucracy.
And it will be, particularly with that, it will be a process of continuous refinement.
Anyone else?